And so I put in a request, and my request was basically, I need all of the information about the surgery. Can you please send it to me? And I received an email back from the secretary, and she says, here's the information we have. And I opened it up, and it's a single-page document stating very basic stuff, like Daniel was admitted on this day for voluntary surgery. It was completed on this day. He was discharged this time. This was the brachial plexus complication. And that was it. That was the whole thing. And I was confused because I had assumed that maybe a doctor would be taking notes at some point, or somebody would be writing something down sometime. And so I emailed them back. And at this point, I'm only doing stuff through emails because I need to make sure that I had a record of what was actually going on. And I said, I need to confirm with you that for my entire surgery, this one sheet of paper that you sent me is actually the only thing you have. And so she emailed me back and she says, yes, from your surgery, this is the paperwork that we have. And I started to get a little bit angry at this point. I had no idea what was going on. I was feeling, I don't know, I guess betrayed in a sense, or left in the dark. At the same time, it kind of felt like now that the surgery was over, it was like, okay, go away and don't come back. And I know it's not the case. I mean, that's just what it feels like. But I got a little bit angry, and so I emailed the head of the transplant department directly and said, if you don't release my files to me, all of them, then I'm going to have to take this up with the head of the hospital. I mean, I don't know what else to do. I can go and file an official complaint and see if that helps. And so he messaged me back and he said, the files will be sent to you. And 2 weeks later I got them, and it was a stack, like 500-600 pages of information, which is all technical. I mean, I have absolutely no idea what I'm looking at. And so I contacted my insurance provider through my work at the time. I was working at Canadian Tire in Huntsville. And I said, look, I've got this stuff. They knew everything that was going on. And I explained to them essentially, like, this is the problem I'm having. And so I laid everything out for them. And they said, well, make a copy of the medical files and send them to us, and we'll have our legal experts, our medical experts, go over it and see, what's going on. Because I'd made it clear to them the entire time that I just wanted to know what was happening. I wanted to know that in 10 years, something wasn't going to randomly happen and I would lose use of my arm. And so I sent it in to them. The consultant that I had through them called me back, and she just said, legally, I can't tell you to do anything. I can't tell you anything specific. I can't give you any legal advice, but I really strongly suggest you go and talk to a lawyer. And so at this point, I'm kind of panicking a little bit. And this is the main reason why I couldn't say anything for a little while with regards to making a video, because I was largely struggling with this ethical dilemma. So the ethical dilemma is this. I truly believe that living organ donation is something that's necessary. It's something that helps people, and it's something that I want to be the kind of person that can promote it. And when I was speaking to the medical lawyers, gave them the paperwork, basically their response was, you have a case, but in order for you to move forward with a legal case, against the hospital, you need to be willing to tell them that it has impacted your life in a vast way, impacted it enough that, you know, if you knew that this was going to happen beforehand, that you wouldn't have done the surgery. And I spoke to 2 different lawyer firms or whatever, and they both said basically the same thing, and it was that in order to move forward with something, I would have to essentially get on the stand and say that my arm is more valuable than the life of the individual who I donated part of my liver to. And it sounds that maybe taking it a little further than they meant, it may be taking it out of context, but the reality of the essence of what it was that I had to place a value on my arm and compare that value to how this child would or wouldn't have gotten part of the liver. And it's not something that I could do. I had no issue whatsoever in terms of money. Like, I wasn't looking for money. It had nothing to do with that. I just wanted answers. I wanted to know what had actually happened to me during the surgery. And I know, you know, when you talk about taking a hospital to court, it's always about, you know, suing for millions of dollars, which I mean, I couldn't care. I mean, who wouldn't like millions of dollars? But I don't, you know, that's not what it is for me. I just wanted to make sure that my arm's not going to stop working at some point. And so it continued for years. After the 2-year mark, at that point, I was no longer, you know, if you have 2 years to file something, and if you don't file it before those 2 years, then you can't file, right? You have 2 years to file after this injury. And I decided that it would do more harm to the organ donation process for me to take the hospital to court, for it to be public, and for even more people to naysay the organ donation process than I already do. And I didn't want to be a part of that. Now, that's not to say that there was no financial expenses issues going on. All in all, I was out of work for 1.5 years while my arm was recovering. And when I went back to work, my arm was not recovered. I went back in a fair amount of pain with a substantial, I was on 3,200 milligrams of gabapentin a day. And I put on 40 pounds because of the medication. One of the rare side effects of it is it can cause weight gain. It also makes you lethargic. So that doesn't help it either. So after 1.5 years of being out of work, I went back. And after doing the math, it cost me, financially, cost me about $22,000 to donate in lost wages. And lost wages is just what I get to take home. I mean, it would be more than that if you include what the government gets. But if it wasn't for the extremely, extremely generous people I knew in Huntsville, I have no idea how I would have made it through that 1.5 years. It was a financially devastating year, never knowing when your next check is going to come. I was on long-term disability, which of course they fight you for every single paycheck. Short-term disability and the program that they have through the hospital to cover the first couple of months of expenses is a joke and seriously needs to be revised. So financially, it did hurt a lot. I mean, I'm still alive, the world's still spinning, so it's not like it's something that was catastrophic and ruined my life. But it was a challenge, for sure. How's the surgery impacted my life 5 years out? And I can say for the most part, the liver part of the liver surgery hasn't affected me very much at all. And like I said, the pain of the arm was so great that the recovery from the surgery itself was peanuts, super easy. I mean, the drive home from the hospital sucked. We were stuck in rush hour traffic for like 3 hours in Toronto, trying to go home. And so my advice is, if you're going to get released from the hospital and you're in a major city, get released at an off traffic time, or have some kind of transit set up so that you're in the car for as little as possible, because a pothole, or if you're in Toronto, if you hit a manhole, it's going to be insanely painful, because everything in there is still tender. You're holding your stomach. I had a pillow between my stomach and the seatbelt, and I would pull the seatbelt as tight as I could get it, just to have that firm pressure there as we were going over the bumps and roads and stuff. But it was a 3-hour drive back to Huntsville, so it was understandably going to be long, but because of rush hour, we were stuck in traffic for like an hour and a half extra. So that is definitely my advice. But as to how my life is affected now, so there are two existing issues that I have from the surgery. One, my arm. Two, has to do with things I can eat. And so, cover the food issue first. So during the surgery, when you're donating, you get your gallbladder removed. And I did not notice that at all for like the first 4 years after the surgery. I didn't notice a difference in my health because of not having a gallbladder at all. And about 10 months ago or so, I started getting some pretty severe stomach pain. And like I said, I have an extensive medical history, and a lot of it has to do with my stomach. So initially I thought maybe it was had something to do with having ulcers, which was an issue I had when I was younger, stomach ulcers. That turned out not to be the case. I thought maybe I was developing a lactose intolerance, and so I was sorting that out, taking lactates, not eating dairy. That didn't seem to do anything. I thought maybe it was spice related, so I cut out certain spices and other things. And it never occurred to me that not having a gallbladder would be an issue until I was reading on one of the living donor transplant forums on Facebook, and somebody was talking about having pain when they're eating fatty foods, and it just clicked in my brain. I was like, well, why is that? Why haven't I thought of that yet? I mean, I love pizza. Love pizza. And I'm eating like crazy amounts of pizza. Not to mention, I like English food, so, I'd be going out, I have bangers and mash, I have Vincent Tatties, all of this super, super greasy food. And that's when I realized that all of the stomach pain I was getting was right after eating a bunch of greasy food. And the pain is akin to having like your inside shred. It feels like you've got glass going through your digestive system. And so immediately, when I realized that could be what's actually the issue, I just cut out all greasy food, all fat and greasy food, as much as I could. And instantly, the pain went away. Stomach issues stopped. So now I'm basically on a less greasy diet. I can still eat pizza, but it's not the same as it used to be. I have to be careful, otherwise I'm in pain for 4 to 8 hours, depending on how my digestive system is working. And so there's that issue. Second issue being my arm. As you can see, I have complete use of it, which is good. Fully functional use of my arm came back after more or less a year and a few months. there is still, at a year and a few months, there was still significant weakness. So I could move it. It's just didn't have the strength to hold a lot of things. So many times I would go to pick up a glass and it would just fall out of my hands, or I was trying to cook something and a pot would fall out of my hands, or I go to grab something and I'm grabbing it too hard or not grabbing it hard enough. And it's just with these 3 fingers. Now I have excellent strength in all of my digits, thankfully. But there is a persistent pain that never goes away. It's a 1 on the pain scale, but it's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm 5 years out, and this is as good as it's going to get. The physiatrist told me that after about 4 years, wherever you're at is where it's going to be, and that seems to be consistent. About 4 years after the surgery, my arm is sort of plateaued. Now I still get periodic bouts of intense pain. It'll feel like I'll be walking along and it'll feel like somebody has just poured a bucket of ice water down my arm, and that pain just washes down over the nerve. There's this weird sensory thing where if I touch here, or if I touch here on my arm, I can feel it here, but I also feel it down here. So I touch here, I can feel it here. If I touch here, I can feel it up in my fingers. And also I can't wear rings and watches. A watch, especially with a metal wristband, is like a branding iron. And I don't know what that's from. I know it's a nerve thing, but other than that, that's all I know. So those are the 2 things. Those are the 2 long-lasting things that I'm always going to have to deal with. Being more careful with what I eat. It's probably 90% to do with not having a gallbladder, 10% to do with the fact that I'm 5 years older than I was back then. My metabolism is slowing down. I'm 35. And the issue with my arm, which was never going to go away. I don't take any medication for it. I just deal with it. Do my meditations, go to my Zen space to get away from the pain. But it is a challenge, and being in constant pain, even if it's just in one part of the arm, always is mentally draining. There are days when I just want to scream, and there are days when I don't really notice it, but it's always there. And one of the strangest things is that with this hand, or for anybody who's never had nerve damage on a single nerve down an appendage, it doesn't really notice the difference between all of your digits. Like this hand feels like this hand. This hand feels like 2 fingers in the bottom of an arm and 3 fingers in the top of an arm. It's a strange thing to try and describe, but this hand does not feel like it used to. There's always like a division in feeling between the bottom part of my arm and the top part of my arm, especially in the hand and the fingers. And a lot of the times when I go to grab something, I will grab just with the bottom, because I'm not entirely sure why that is. It's like I have to consciously make an effort now to grab things with my entire hand. So that's interesting as well. And so that's basically it. That's the last 5 years. And so this will be the last video I do. I mean, it might be 30 years from now if I decided to do another one anyways. It takes so long. But I have considered doing other donations. I'm still rolling around the idea of doing a living kidney donation, but I'm not 100% sure if they would even let me do it with my arm. I don't know how hospitals work with that. I did the liver donation knowing that you can do a kidney donation afterwards, whereas if you do a kidney donation, they very rarely let you do a liver donation afterwards, at least not while you're alive. So I think at some point down the road I may decide to do a living kidney donation one. But we'll see what happens. I mean, life is generally going pretty good, and I don't think we'll see what the future holds.